Welcome everybody to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Dustin Muscato, who is CEO of Green Street
Advisory. Yeah, Green Street Advisory. Yeah.
He has an incredible amount of experience in private equity, in deal sourcing and execution, portfolio management, strategy, structure, due diligence, all of that. So he has a tremendous amount of experience working in New York and Connecticut with the issues of business needs. So with that, Dustin, I'll just turn it over to you and to share with us what you see the trends being and what you see the impacts are for business today.
Great. Thank you, Lois, so much for that very kind and humbling introduction and for having me here today. As I was sharing with you when we first connected, there's a lot of, I think, opportunities right now that all businesses have available to them to take advantage of. And of course, there's challenges, whether it's sort of general market challenges. I mean, right now you have, inflation. So you have, cost of goods and cost of labor that is going up. You have supply chain shortages. You have, believe it or not, despite sort of record unemployment through the pandemic, you have what I will just call, record challenges in hiring and in the labor markets. And so I think it's twofold. You have tremendous opportunity right now, and yet you have very interesting challenges which came on really quickly. There's two of them that I think are highly relevant, regardless of sort of, product or service that the company is offering, or, rather what market or industry they're serving. And regardless of the size of the company, I think there's two core issues that are highly relevant to any business today. My experience is really here in the US, so these comments are highly relevant. It very well may be quite different over in Europe or Latin America. So, my comments are really specific here to the US and really more so the small to medium-sized business, or what I'll call the middle market or the lower middle market, okay? So I think the two issues that are really interesting are filling the labor demand that companies have to service their growth that they're seeing, whether it's organic growth because the markets are on fire, or they're just executing really well, and so they have to hire and grow their business. And associated with that growth is the need for efficient, tailored capital to fund that growth. Right. So these are two things that, regardless of what industry you're in, you have to overcome, and you have to solve these issues intelligently. So, if we can talk about this, and, I think that, we'll be able to deliver a lot of value to your audience. And so let's talk about hiring for a minute, and just talent sourcing, and really just the workforce environment we find ourselves in today. Right. So going into the pandemic, you had record employment levels, right? I think unemployment was at historical lows. Everybody considered, this was the basis of the election, right? It was, well, the economy is raging, and so that's going to really weigh in the election. Of course, ultimately that, things turned the tide and went another direction, and that went where it went. But you went from having sort of the lowest unemployment to employment to record historical pandemic-driven unemployment. And I know that I was expecting that to rebound. And of course, you would think that, everybody would be racing back into the workforce. And interestingly enough, that's not what happened. Right now, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to talk about macro trends. I can talk about it from the lens through which I'm actively working with companies right now. So you've seen companies that have, let's say, high volume workforce, call centers, sales organizations, construction organizations, which tend to always be hiring on a regular cycle. That's just sort of part and parcel of their business, right? And shockingly, and these are reasonably good jobs that are reasonably good paying jobs. They're not minimum wage jobs, right? They may not be very high paying jobs, but they're respectable jobs where a person can earn a respectable living. They can learn a skill, they can learn a trade. And if they learn that skill or trade, they're going to be able to monetize it. So you would think that these would be jobs that are in high demand. But what's interesting is that the demand from the hiring side has been so dramatic to fill the demand, that this pent up demand through the pandemic, that companies have gotten into literally like labor price wars, trying to hire and train and retain talent. And actually what you've seen is a bit of fear, because they're worried now that, well, hey, if I was typically paying this job at $25 an hour, and I go out and I hire a sort of a middle level person, I'm going to actually pay them $30 an hour. I'm going to train them. I'm going to embed them in my organization. And is my competitor going to come in and steal them for $32 an hour? Even though we were all paying $24, $25 a year ago, I can't believe someone would leave my company for an extra $2 an hour. And yet we've now seen that happen over and over and over. So the question is, well, how does a company, and that's of course just one example, right? There's a lot of ways that we could hit it, but I think that this is really relevant to small businesses that don't have an unlimited budget, right? They don't have unlimited low-cost Wall Street financing to sort of, grow their workforce. And so if you're a small business owner and you're facing these challenges, and how do I invest appropriately? Well, I think the answer is you have to step back and you have to figure out, well, what is the real opportunity you're creating for that person that would then make them move past? Because anybody can sort of come in and offer an employee a couple of dollars an hour, or if it's salary, a few $1,000s more a year. I mean, that risk is always there for a business owner, right? So how do you overcome that? And I think the first answer is small businesses have to begin thinking about, well, how do I create an opportunity or a career for this person? Even if they're not going to spend the rest of their life at my small or medium-sized business, how do they know that if they stick with my business and they deliver value, I'm going to deliver value back to them beyond just, the wages and compensation they're going to be. So I think, number one, it goes without saying that we're simply in a time period where companies have to figure out how to be competitive to retain the best talent. Okay, or to attract, rather before retain, to attract the best talent, you have to figure out within your organization or within your organization's economic capabilities, how are you going to attract the right talent with, the right compensation and benefits and even framework, right? One of the things that you see more and more is people want access to freedom of mobility and freedom of time off. And if an organization can work with that person on a trust and value-driven basis, that they can get the comfort that, hey, if I hire this sort of mid to senior level person and they have more vacation time than I'm accustomed to, it's not going to matter because they're going to deliver so much value. It's not about hours put in, but about results, right? And so I think if the businesses think that way and they seek to attract people that also think that way, you're going to get much more of a partnership driven hiring situation. And then that flows right over into the retention, where if I'm at a company and I know there's a great opportunity and I'm providing value, they have every incentive to continue to retain me. And at the same time, if I'm going to them every 45 days saying, well, hey, your competitor across the street offered me another $2 and I'm the business owner and I fear that that's going to keep happening, then I don't feel good about that relationship either. So I think you have to first set up your organization so you can attract the right talent. And then you have to work with that talent about what's the real opportunity and why are they taking this job with this company as opposed to the competitor across the street. And it's because of the longer term opportunity and the value they're going to get back from that company and that partnership driven. These things may not be relevant to, let's say, the lower levels in an organization, right? Sort of non-VP, non-director, non-executive, right? Where you just have an employee, they want their hourly wage. Maybe it's less relevant, but if they think they have job security, their paycheck is going to be on time every week, and that there is a future opportunity, you're still in a better position than had you not thought about those things.
You hear that discussion a lot, right? And so now the onus is on the company to really explain what it is, what their value system is, what their attitude is towards employees, because people are shopping for that right now.
They are. Yeah, they are. And I think, you bring up another point, which I didn't really hit on, but is really highly relevant, especially not just corporately, but socially now, right? Which is that people are evaluating the values, right? So the philosophical approach to doing business to people. And these are tough. These, I don't subscribe to the binary sort of approach or thought on some of these issues, right? Like people want to say, well, hey, this is a black and white issue. It's either this way or that way. I don't think that that's real. And I think that in the real world, when you're dealing with, diverse workforces of everything, culturally, age, experience, backgrounds, it's very difficult for a business to try to sort of create almost a matrix of how do I please everybody, right? It's more about defining core values that speak to you, the owners of the business, the employees of the business, the customers you're trying to serve, and that of course are reflective of, this is going to sound silly, but of the modern times, right? Things are different now. You do have to be more thoughtful in the workplace about social engagement issues, which just weren't relevant before. And, whether businesses like it or not, these are important issues, and they're only going to get more important. And I think sometimes business owners get concerned with, well, how do I please everybody? Well, you're never going to please everybody, right? And that's on a personal basis, right? We've all learned this lesson, right? If you go through life trying to please everybody, the only person who's going to be unhappy is you. So for a business, you're never going to create sort of a hierarchy of how do I please everybody. But what you can do is you can define true core values that you can adhere to, that are reflective of the current environment, that drive your business forward, that sort of add value to your clients, and that the employees and partners that you're working with sort of can see that, and it's reflective of, I think, where we're at in today's society.
As you've worked with companies, Dustin, especially in the energy sector,
yeah.
How have you found companies are handling this? Have you found best practices? Have you found people who have been able to embrace this and find good solutions, or what do you see happening?
So, I don't want to say that I'm an expert, let's say, on, employee engagement matters. And typically I'm not, working with companies directly on that, right? Like I'm not an HR manager or a labor consultant or something like that. So I'll talk at the higher level and how it's come up, right, and how we've addressed it, where it has come up. And, I certainly know people who are absolute experts in sort of employee engagement and culture building. And I'm happy to, refer some of those people to you, because I'm sure that this would be a really hot and exciting topic for your audience. But I'll talk about it at the executive level and like the board level, which is where I engage and where I interact. So business owners are concerned that they don't know how to react to these issues. And they're concerned that if they have senior people that are embedded in their organizations that are very high value, but they're I don't want to say they're older and stuck in their ways, because it's really not like that. They're accustomed. They've been doing something like this for 15 years, 20 years. They're accustomed to certain interactions in the workplace. And so I think the first and most successful thing that I have seen where we've talked about these issues is it has to come from the top. Right. And you have to be forthright, and you got to sort of like break that mold right away. You got to get the key leadership in a room, and you have to just open up the topic and say, this is real. We have to talk about it. We have to adjust where necessary if we need to adjust. And even if it's as simple as, hey, we're bringing in new talent that is different than the talent that we were bringing in before. And we want to see this. We want to see emerging in a collaborative sort of approach, because we actually fundamentally believe as an organization that the audiences we're going to be serving are going to care more and more and more about some of these social issues that we never even had to think about. And I think that what you're going to find is that when you have an open and thoughtful dialogue and people understand that it's about the evolution of the business as it serves more and more of its audience, that these are going to be open and respectful discussions as to how you may need changes to legal documents for employment agreements. I mean, you sort of get into this granularity, right? Where you're hiring new employment lawyers to advise you on these things. And so I think that the primary piece of value that I can deliver there is that it's got to start from the top. You shouldn't be fighting, even again, to get back to, let's say, the talent attraction, right? Well, if all of your competitors are able to pay more, then maybe it says something about the efficiency of your organization and how you're managing your business. If you're so stuck that all of your competition has figured out a way to pay an employee another $2 an hour, but you haven't, you can fight it. You can say the employees are crazy. Last year we paid 25, why is it 32? Or you can figure out how to thoughtfully review your organization, where the inefficiencies are, so you can be competitive in the marketplace. And so I encourage people to look at all of these problems in this way, right? It's just, you raise your hand, you say, my responsibility, solution oriented, let's engage everybody, hear all the voices. And so, there's a term, and it's escaping me right now, but it's basically that, the best and most productive ideas win, right? So you bring everybody together, you have an open dialogue, and then, you get the best solutions.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a need for collaborative leadership down the road, and it's different than how we've been traditionally taught to lead. I think there were models back in the 70s, perhaps, where we began to play with it. And then we made a shift in how we began to look at organizational development. But you're right, people are asking for something very different, and it's in a sense very collaborative.
Yeah.
Dustin,
agreed.
You talked also about money, and I'm concerned that companies have access to capital that they're going to need in that mid-size range company. What's your sense, sitting on boards of directors, and what their experience is with that?
So this is an interesting question. And so, I think that in many ways, there can actually be a misconception about access to capital. And so, with interest rates at historical lows, even as we're probably going to see, I think we know we're going to see interest rates rise this year, right, to curb inflation, and hopefully that all works out. Again, I'm not an economist or a macro person, so I'm not really going to opine further on that. But I think there's an expectation that, generally speaking, there's going to be a general rise in rates over the coming years, right, which affects everything, right, because it just changes the whole dynamic from borrowing to investment expectations.
Right.
And yet the reality is even with those rises in interest rates, on a long-term basis, we're still going to be at a historically low cost of capital. It's not going to be free money like it has, at the largest, sort of ranks of corporate America, right? Fortune 100, Fortune 500. Interest rates have been so low as to almost be zero, right? And so you've seen, and there's a lot of data out there on this, which is that, corporate borrowings of every type have been at absolute record numbers, which is sort of, it's good for Wall Street and it's good for the companies because they can perpetually refinance, they can borrow, they can grow, they can leverage up their businesses in ways that it makes sense when you're borrowing at 1% or 1.2%, right? It's almost free. That's going to change, and so I think you're going to see that change at the larger ends of the business. But when you get down to the middle market and the lower middle market, there's record amounts of capital available for that segment, but not all business owners actually know how to take advantage of it. Whether it's financing through the SBA, which believe it or not has always been there, but people really weren't they didn't really understand how to take advantage of it. And with the PPP loans and things like that, I think that really opened up a concept of, hey, there's a real financing vehicle here which might be really workable for my business through SBA loans and things like that. But on the private markets, you have both private equity funds as well as credit funds venture debt and things like this. I mean, every other day there's an announcement of a new fund that has been capitalized that seeks to focus and serve this market. But where I think the efficiency has not yet come is from the other way, right? So you have a lot of money chasing what they believe is a small number of opportunities, or not small, but a fixed number of opportunities, right? Which then drives lower cost in those markets. But I think that on the borrower side or the corporate side, if it's sort of a private equity investment, they don't yet really know how to access this capital that they've heard is available, but they don't yet know how to access it. And so I think there's a phenomenal opportunity for people to intelligently figure out how to engage a broader set of sort of lower middle and middle market companies that are seeking growth capital. I think, despite the challenges with COVID, I think that people are very excited about the growth capabilities that we're going to see, because, now people actually figured out, well, you know what? I actually can conduct my business on Zoom calls. Maybe it's not ideal, maybe it's not perfect, but I actually know that I can operate and grow my business even in this challenging environment. And so I think there's a resiliency that has come from that, regardless. And I'm largely focused on energy, so a lot of my lens is through that. And I can speak about the solar business. And I mean, the solar market in the United States has grown more in the last 18 months than ever in history, and it's not slowing down. There's record amounts of capital available, and people are really trying to figure out, well, how do I access this capital? How can I use it to grow my business? And so, but that's the piece that on the company side, they have not yet figured out. Well, I hear it. There's all this money available. How do I get it? How do I connect with it? So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation there in the coming years. I mean, people throw around the word fintech, right? So more and more fintechs to sort of address this capital deployment inefficiency. I think you're going to see more of that. That's just my opinion, but I think the trends are pointing in that direction. But yeah, I think there's a fabulous opportunity. And I think one of the best ways that companies can take advantage of the capital that's out there is gaining a clearer understanding of what type of capital is right for their business.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's a challenge, right? So when you speak about sort of this generalized concept of capital markets or investment or whatever it is, right? It can get very blurry, especially with a company that has not historically had some sort of a third-party financial partner, whatever form that's been in, right? And so I think that, one of the best things that a small business can do is really to educate themselves on, well, what do I even need? What do I have to have and show in my business that's going to be attractive for the right type of investor or lender, whatever the case may be? And, you can have anything from receivables financing to, sort of small business term loans to, minority equity investments to preferred equity investment. I mean, there's so many ways in which investors are willing to engage and interact with a company to give it the resources it needs. But if you need an equity investor, you shouldn't be talking to a lender. And that's a pretty obvious example, but there's so many sort of layers in to target the right investor or investment group that's going to actually give your company the capital it needs to grow. I think educating themselves about this industry is probably the number one most effective way that any group could approach it.
I think you're absolutely right about education, because as we were coming out of COVID, I was talking with a number of businesses and asked them, how were they doing and how were they thriving, planning to move forward. And the comment that I heard over and over again was, well, we've gone through angel investing. VC is becoming a little bit more difficult. And so there's this sense amongst business of, how do we navigate this? It's just what you were talking about.
Right.
That when you're in business, you don't have the time or
That's
the
right.
energy to begin that discussion. So what would you suggest to people? How do they look at that? How do they begin that process?
That's a great question. And I actually think that you're sort of identifying, because, you know, whenever we look at any situation, right, you can think about what's the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach, right? And so the bottom-up approach is where you have a proactive business owner, and let's say they're earlier stage, right? So maybe they do have a couple of $100,000 of angel investing, and, you know, that's taken them to the point where they are now growing. They're servicing more and more clients, and they need working capital, or they need to hire, you know, some design engineers, and they need additional liquidity that their business can't fund today. And the traditional route would be to go do some sort of a VC, or still maybe a pre-VC, or some level of institutional capital that is beyond angel or friends and family, right? And so that's more of a bottom-up approach of, well, I need it. Where do I go? And, you know, if you're in Silicon Valley, or if you're in New York City, then, you know, there's reasonable access to it. You can find it, right? You can find it through Google searches, and there's a platform. Just, this is purely, I am not an advocate. I'm not, you know, a sponsor for this, but it's just an example of, there's something called Axial, AXIAL. And that's, they're one group that is sought to solve this, both on the investment side for access to opportunities, as well as on the business side, so you can sort of become a member of their platform and they help connect you. There's more and more, they've been around for a number of years. They're a great outfit. And there's more and more of those sort of connective tissue type situations that are cropping up. But I think that, again, I think it comes down to, I mean, the good news with the environment we're in today is that you can learn anything on the internet for free. And, you know, Elon Musk has said that over and over and over, right? I mean, you don't, you know, the question is, and this is asked more and more, does a person even need to go get a formal 4-year education now and get a bachelor's degree? A lot of discussion we could have on that. But on the topic of, you know, ability to access knowledge, which gives me the ability to pursue something effectively and execute on it to grow my business, you quite literally have unlimited access to all the information you're going to need on the internet. And so, as crude as it might sound, I think business owners that think they need financing, the first thing that they should do is go to Google and spend a few weeks educating themselves. And I mean, they're gonna be miles ahead purely from doing that. And probably a lot of groups do that. Even if it's through that, you then, you know, find the names of a few outfits that you believe could be potential, maybe they're intermediaries, investment bankers, or placement agents, or what have you, that could help your business. Even if it's just getting the names of a few of those and reaching out, once, like anything, once you begin having those interactions, it's going to lead to other things. I'm a big believer of just pick up the phone, call, reach out, you meet people. And, you know, what you're going to find as companies begin to interact with, let's say, the institutional investment world, you're going to find that you're dealing with very professional, educated, thoughtful people, which is why they're successful, which is why they're sort of managing, you know, the situations they're managing. And if they can't help you and you're thoughtful in that interaction, in many cases, they're going to be willing to refer you to someone that can help you if they have that contact. And so I think you just have to get started, do some research, reach out to whoever makes the most sense, and then just sort of, it will evolve from there. That's you know, that's what I think is true.
Do you see, Dustin, a point where companies coming together, like you're in the energy sector, are there things that some of the companies that you work with could work together with and perhaps cut their costs, increase their strength in the marketplace so they could dominate it better? Do you see any of those kinds of opportunities emerging?
Are you referring to like let's say vendor partnerships, or are you referring to, you know, companies that would otherwise be competitors? What? Yeah.
It could be. So it could be any of the above. So the reason I'm asking that question is, as we look at knowledge, for example, some companies have more knowledge in certain areas and they can share it. That's a valuable commodity. Other people are very good at, they figured out this talent business and employees, and they figured out how to manage it through their organizations. And whatever the issues are, if you had a group of these that actually came together and thoughtfully shared and helped each other in that industry, do you see that that could possibly take shape?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I mean, I would sort of, just define what I believe you're referring to, which is really the synergies within two different organizations, right? So,
Yes.
sort of the old, you have peanut butter, I have jelly. We put them together, and we'll both bring a piece of bread, and 1 + 1 = 3, right? So, I mean, to me, that's really your traditional sort of M&A thesis, right? And you have some organizations. I'm a believer that regardless of what industry you're in, sales is almost always king, right? If you can't sell efficiently and effectively and in a scaled manner, you're always going to struggle, right? So organizations that may be imperfect on execution or financing or capital structure, but they're just absolute monsters on sales, those companies tend to do well. They tend to be around for a long time, because as long as you can grow the top line and you have money coming through the organization, you can solve a lot of other problems, right? But you could be the best, hiring and labor company in the world, but if your sales are stagnant, you're really going to struggle, right?
It doesn't matter, does it? No.
It doesn't matter. And so I think that the answer there, it comes down to each individual company, right? So maybe you're the company that is just fantastic at sales, and you recognize that, and that, your competitors are sort of struggling to sell at, a cost of X, and you're already selling at a cost of 0.5X, right? So you're so far ahead, but maybe you're really having a hard time on execution. And you've tried and you've hired and you just sort of can't get it right. That's a great situation. You can say, well, who are our competitors that seem to be really good at the customer fulfillment side, or the manufacturing side or the supply chain side, right? And so the question then becomes buy versus build, right? Is it more efficient and effective? And can we overcome maybe the cultural differences of a company that's largely driven on sales and that, sort of just internal corporate culture versus an organization that's not really sales focused? Can you combine those effectively? And, that's sort of an age-old question in M&A, right? I mean, and I think it's a great thesis. And with a low cost of capital out there, generally, like we were talking earlier, it's certainly a great environment to leverage that, right? If you can borrow money and go make an acquisition or do some sort of a merger with two companies that allows for greater scale, then that's always a good idea. But there's always risk in that too, right? Nothing is risk-free.
Absolutely. There's nothing that's ever risk-free.
No.
Dustin, our time is almost up. And so what have we left out that's really important for people to know in today's market, the market that's coming in the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for the time. I really, really enjoy this, and, we'll have to do it again. I think it's just the starting point that you have to look at the market that's emerging as the best opportunity that you've seen in 100 years, because it's that sort of creative, forthright mindset that is going to allow you to approach these new challenges, because the reality is it's all new for all of us, right? Here we are on a Zoom call, and, this is how a lot of us spend a great, majority of our days, is doing things digitally. So just to use that as a single example, right? Everyone had to figure out, how do you do that? How do you do it?
Right.
And so, but if you embrace it, you can say, well, this is the new current reality. It's not changing. I can push back on it. I can protest it. I can quit. I can, move somewhere else where my lifestyle is different. Well, but the reality is the world's going to continue. And so you have to embrace the new norms in a constructive way. And I think recognize that change always begets opportunity. And so just evaluate it not as challenges or problems, but purely as change. And so step back and figure out how to evolve, engage your people, because more often than not, the solutions are going to come within an organization from the people that are dealing with the minutia of the challenges. And I give a really simple example on this, but as one company that I'm working with has grown 4 times in the last last 15 months.
Wow.
Something as simple as, how do we organize the office that does the permitting and the scheduling? And we realized that it has to be done on a local level. And we really thought we could centralize it. And we were driving the people nuts on the local level. We didn't even realize it until we went and asked them. And they said, we'll do it. We're much better at it. We need to handle it locally. And we said, all we had to do was ask the right questions to the people who are affected by those decisions. And we got all the answers we needed. So, that's what I would leave you with. Engage your people, let them help you solve the problems of growth of the business, and just know that the greatest opportunities are ahead of us. And it's going to be an exciting few years. So,
you know what? I love your optimism, Dustin. That is so great, because a lot of people are nervous and worried, and
Sure.
Your optimism and just looking at it as, wow, this is a new opportunity, I think that's exciting for people. So Dustin, thank you
Great.
so much for being with us today on Building My Legacy podcast. And those of you who are with us, thank you too. And Dustin, we'll have you come back. This is a wonderful discussion to keep on having. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Have a great day. I appreciate having me on, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.